The fluorescent lights of Lincoln Middle School hummed their usual tune, as 12-year-old Marcus Rivera clutched his backpack straps, walking down the crowded hallway with his eyes fixed firmly on the scuffed linoleum floor. The morning chatter of students filled the air, but Marcus had learned to tune out most conversations. They rarely included him anyway, and when they did, the words weren't kind. "Hey, look who's trying to be invisible again," came the familiar voice of Tyler Bennett, the 8th grader who seemed to have made tormenting Marcus his personal mission. Tyler's crew of followers snickered as they formed a loose circle around Marcus near his locker. "What's in the bag today, Rivera?" "More of those weird drawings." Marcus's grip tightened on his backpack. Inside were indeed his sketchbooks, filled with drawings of superheroes, fantasy creatures, and portraits of people who seemed happier than anyone in his real world. Art was his escape, his way of creating something beautiful in a life that often felt anything but. But Tyler and his friends saw his passion as just another reason to make his days miserable. Before we continue, tell us where you're listening from today in the comments below. If you enjoy stories with unexpected twists and moments of justice, please consider subscribing. "Leave me alone, Tyler," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible above the hallway noise. He fumbled with his combination lock, his hands trembling slightly. The numbers blurred together as tears threatened to spill from his dark brown eyes. "What did you say?" Tyler stepped closer, his shadow falling across Marcus's locker. "I couldn't hear you over all that mumbling. Speak up, Art Boy." The hallway seemed to pulse with the energy of students hurrying to their first period classes, but Marcus felt frozen in place. His heart hammered against his ribs as he finally managed to open his locker. Books and papers were scattered inside, evidence of yesterday's prank when Tyler had shaken his backpack upside down, claiming he was just trying to help Marcus organize. "I said leave me alone," Marcus repeated, this time with more conviction, though his voice still shook. He began pulling out his textbooks for his morning classes, trying to ignore the way Tyler's friends were positioning themselves to block other students' view of what was happening. "Or what?" Tyler's voice carried a mocking edge that made Marcus's stomach clench. "You'll draw me a mean picture? Maybe tattletale to your mommy?" The mention of his mother sent a sharp pain through Marcus's chest. His mom, Selena Rivera, worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. She left for her first job at the hospital cafeteria before dawn and didn't return from her evening shift at the grocery store until after 9 most nights. She had enough to worry about without knowing that her son spent his school days walking through a minefield of cruelty. "My mom has nothing to do with this," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger despite the way his hands continued to shake. He slammed his locker door shut and turned to face Tyler directly for the first time in weeks. "Just leave me alone. I've never done anything to you." Tyler's expression shifted from amusement to something darker. The fact that Marcus had finally looked him in the eye seemed to trigger something aggressive in the older boy. "You exist," Tyler said simply. "That's enough." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had heard cruel comments before, had his belongings destroyed, had been shoved in hallways and excluded from group activities, but something about Tyler's casual dismissal of his very right to exist felt different. It felt final, hopeless. As the warning bell rang and students began dispersing to their classrooms, Tyler leaned in close enough that Marcus could smell the artificial strawberry scent of his gum. "This isn't over, Rivera. Not by a long shot." Marcus watched Tyler and his friends swagger away down the hallway, their laughter echoing off the metal lockers. He stood there for a moment, surrounded by the ordinary chaos of a school morning, feeling more alone than he had ever felt in his 12 years of life. Other students brushed past him, hurrying to beat the final bell, but none of them met his eyes. It was as if Tyler's words had made him truly invisible. The first period bell rang shrilly overhead, and Marcus realized he was going to be late for English class. Mrs. Patterson would mark him tardy again, adding another small failure to his growing collection. He hurried down the hallway, his sneakers squeaking against the floor, already dreading the moment he would have to walk into the classroom and feel every eye turned toward him. But as he rushed toward his classroom, Marcus couldn't shake Tyler's words from his mind. "You exist. That's enough." The simple cruelty of it wrapped around his heart like ice, making it hard to breathe, hard to imagine that things would ever get better. He had no way of knowing that in just 3 weeks, his entire world was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. That a chance encounter, a viral video, and the compassionate heart of someone he had only ever seen on magazine covers would transform not just his own life, but the lives of countless other children facing the same daily battle he fought in the hallways of Lincoln Middle School. For now, though, Marcus was just a 12-year-old boy trying to make it through another day, carrying his dreams in a backpack, and his pain in a heart that was learning, far too young, what it meant to feel truly alone in a crowded room. 3 weeks passed, in their usual pattern of carefully orchestrated avoidance and unavoidable confrontation. Marcus had developed an intricate mental map of Lincoln Middle School that allowed him to minimize his encounters with Tyler and his crew, but some collisions were inevitable. The cafeteria remained a battleground where his lunch money occasionally disappeared, and his carefully packed sandwiches ended up decorating the floor. The gymnasium was worse, a vast space where Tyler's athletic prowess made him a king among his peers, and where Marcus's lack of coordination in sports became another source of public humiliation. But it was an art class where Marcus truly came alive. Mrs. Chen, the art teacher, had noticed his talent early in the semester and had begun staying after school once a week to work with him on more advanced techniques. Under her gentle guidance, Marcus's drawings had evolved from simple sketches to detailed portraits and elaborate fantasy scenes that seemed to leap off the page with life and emotion. "You have a gift, Marcus," Mrs. Chen had told him just the day before as she examined his latest piece, a drawing of a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings spread wide against a stormy sky. "Your ability to capture emotion in your work is remarkable for someone your age. Have you ever considered entering any art competitions?" The idea had both thrilled and terrified Marcus. The thought of his work being seen by strangers, possibly judged and found wanting, made his stomach twist with anxiety. But there was something else, too. A small flame of pride that flickered to life when he imagined his drawings hanging in a gallery somewhere, admired by people who understood the beauty he was trying to create. "I don't know," he had answered honestly. "What if they're not good enough?" Mrs. Chen had smiled at him with a kind of warmth that made Marcus remember what it felt like to feel valued. "Marcus, the only way to fail is to never try. Your art has something special in it. Hope, even when you're drawing difficult subjects. That's a rare gift." Now, as Marcus sat in the school library during lunch, working on a new drawing instead of facing the cafeteria gauntlet, he found himself thinking about Mrs. Chen's words. The library was his sanctuary, a place where the strict no-talking rule meant that Tyler and his friends couldn't verbally torment him, and where Mrs. Rodriguez, the librarian, had developed a protective fondness for the quiet boy who spent his lunch periods surrounded by art books and sketch pads. His current drawing was different from his usual fantasy creatures and superheroes. Instead, he was working on a self-portrait, but not as he appeared in real life. In his drawing, he stood tall and confident, his shoulders back, his eyes bright with determination rather than shadowed with fear. Around him, he had sketched other figures, kids who looked like they belonged to different social groups, different backgrounds, all standing together with expressions of acceptance and friendship. "That's beautiful, Marcus!" The soft voice startled him from his concentration. He looked up to see Sarah Kim, a girl from his English class, standing beside his table with her own lunch tray. Sarah was quiet like him, but in a different way. She seemed to choose her solitude rather than have it forced upon her. She was also one of the smartest kids in their grade, always raising her hand with insightful answers that made their teachers smile with genuine pleasure. "Thank you," Marcus said, instinctively moving his arm to partially cover the drawing. He wasn't used to compliments from classmates, and he half expected this to be some kind of setup for a cruel joke. "Can I sit here?" Sarah asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "The cafeteria is too noisy today, and I have some reading to catch up on." Marcus nodded, still wary but curious. Sarah settled into the chair with her turkey sandwich and apple slices, pulling a worn copy of The Outsiders from her backpack. For several minutes they sat in comfortable silence, Marcus continuing to work on his drawing while Sarah read, occasionally glancing up to watch him work. "You know," Sarah said eventually, keeping her voice low to respect the library's atmosphere, "I saw what happened in the hallway last week. With Tyler." Marcus's hand froze over his sketch pad, his cheeks flushed hot with embarrassment, and something that felt like shame, though he couldn't understand why he should feel ashamed of being Tyler's victim. "I wanted to say something," Sarah continued, "but I didn't know what would help and what would make things worse for you. I'm sorry I just watched." The unexpected apology caught Marcus off guard. He had become so accustomed to being invisible during his worst moments that he hadn't realized anyone was paying attention, let alone feeling bad about not intervening. "It's okay," he said quietly. "There's not much anyone can do anyway. Tyler's going to do what Tyler wants to do." Sarah closed her book and leaned forward slightly. That's not true, you know. There are things that can be done. Adults who would listen if they knew what was really happening. Marcus shook his head. I'm not a tattletale. And besides, it would just make things worse. Tyler has friends, and his parents know the principal. Nobody's going to believe me over him. The resignation in his voice seemed to genuinely upset Sarah. Her dark eyes flashed with an anger that Marcus had never seen directed on his behalf. That's so messed up, she said, her voice growing slightly louder before she caught herself and glanced around the library. Just because someone is popular doesn't mean they should get away with being cruel. And just because someone is different doesn't mean they deserve to be treated badly. There was something in the way she said different that made Marcus look at her more carefully. Sarah had always seemed confident to him, self-assured in a way that he envied. But now he noticed things he had missed before. The way she sat alone at lunch most days, the way she rarely spoke up in group settings unless called upon directly, the way she seemed to observe everything around her with the same careful attention he had learned to pay to potential threats. Are you? Marcus began, then stopped himself. He wasn't sure how to ask what he was thinking without potentially offending her. Different? Sarah finished for him with a small, sad smile. Yeah, I guess I am. I'm not getting shoved around like you are, but I know what it feels like to not quite fit in anywhere. To feel like you're watching everyone else live their lives from the outside. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a loosening of the tight knot of isolation that had taken a permanent residence in his chest. Here was someone who understood, at least partially, what his daily experience felt like. Your drawings, Sarah said, nodding toward his sketchpad. They're not just good because you're talented. They're good because they mean something. You can see that you put pieces of yourself into them. Pieces of what you wish the world could be like. Marcus looked down at his self-portrait again, seeing it through Sarah's eyes. She was right. It wasn't just a drawing of how he wished he looked. It was a drawing of the world he wished he could live in, where being different wasn't a crime punishable by daily humiliation. Maybe Mrs. Chen is right, he said quietly. Maybe I should enter that art competition she mentioned. What art competition? Sarah asked, genuine interest lighting up her features. Marcus explained Mrs. Chen's suggestion about local art contests, his voice growing more animated as he talked about the possibility of his work being displayed somewhere beyond the school hallways. Sarah listened intently, asking questions about his artistic process and encouraging him to pursue the opportunity. As the lunch period drew to a close and students began filtering out of the library toward their afternoon classes, Marcus realized that something significant had happened. He had made a friend. Not just someone who tolerated his presence or felt sorry for him, but someone who saw value in who he was and what he created. Marcus, Sarah said as they packed up their belongings, whatever happens with Tyler, whatever happens with anything else, don't let anyone convince you that your art doesn't matter. Don't let them convince you that you don't matter. As they walked together toward their respective classrooms, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. It was fragile and tentative, like a small plant pushing through concrete, but it was real. He had no way of knowing that this tiny seed of hope, nurtured by Sarah's friendship and Mrs. Chen's encouragement, would soon grow into something that would change not just his life, but the lives of young people across the entire country. The bell rang for fifth period, and Marcus hurried toward his science class with his head held just slightly higher than usual. Behind him, Tyler Bennett watched from his locker, his eyes narrow, with the kind of calculating malice that suggested Marcus's small moment of happiness would not go unnoticed or unpunished. The art competition deadline was approaching fast, and Marcus had decided to submit 3 pieces: his phoenix drawing, a detailed portrait of his mother that captured both her exhaustion and her resilience, and a piece he had titled Invisible, a drawing of a student sitting alone in a crowded cafeteria, surrounded by empty space, while other students laughed and talked in tight groups around him. Mrs. Chen had helped him prepare the submissions, providing professional quality paper and even driving him to the community center where the entries were being collected. Remember, she had said as they stood outside the building, win or lose, you should be proud of putting yourself out there. Art is about communication, and you're finally ready to share your voice with the world. Marcus had nodded, clutching the portfolio that contained weeks of his best work. The thought that strangers would soon be looking at his drawings, judging them, potentially rejecting them, made his hands shake with nervous energy. But Sarah's words from the library kept echoing in his mind. Don't let anyone convince you that you don't matter. That had been 2 weeks ago. Now Marcus was trying to focus on his regular schoolwork while fighting off the constant anxiety about the competition results. The judges were supposed to announce the winners soon, but soon felt like an eternity when every day still meant navigating Tyler's escalating campaign of harassment. Tyler seemed to sense that something had shifted in Marcus's demeanor, that the quiet boy was harboring some small flame of hope, and he appeared determined to extinguish it completely. The bullying had become more creative, more calculated. Marcus's locker had been broken into twice, his homework assignments mysteriously disappeared from his backpack, and during gym class, Tyler had accidentally spiked a volleyball directly into Marcus's face, giving him a bloody nose and a bruise that lasted for days. "Maybe you should quit drawing and take up boxing instead," Tyler had said afterward, loud enough for the other students to hear and laugh. Though I guess you'd need some actual muscle for that. But the worst part wasn't the physical intimidation or even the destruction of his property. The worst part was the way Tyler had begun targeting Marcus's friendship with Sarah. Whenever he saw them talking together, Tyler would find ways to interrupt, making loud comments about the weird kids sticking together, or asking Sarah in a mockingly sweet voice if she was Marcus's girlfriend. The attention made Sarah visibly uncomfortable, and Marcus could see her beginning to pull away, choosing to sit at different tables during lunch and avoiding their usual post-class conversations. Marcus understood. He didn't blame Sarah for protecting herself, but losing his one friendship felt like losing the last bright spot in his increasingly dark world. He began spending even more time alone, eating lunch in the art room when Mrs. Chen would let him, focusing obsessively on his drawings as a way to escape the growing pressure in his chest that felt like he was drowning in plain sight. It was on a particularly difficult Thursday that Marcus's world began to shift in ways he could never have anticipated. He was walking home from school, taking his usual route through the residential streets that allowed him to avoid the bus where Tyler's friends liked to continue their torment, when his phone buzzed with a notification. He almost ignored it. Most of his notifications were spam or automated school messages, but something made him check. The email was from the community center, with a subject line that made his heart stop. Art competition results. Congratulations. Marcus ducked behind a large oak tree in someone's front yard and opened the email with trembling fingers. The words seemed to swim on his phone screen as he read, "We are pleased to inform you that your submission, Invisible, has been selected as the first place winner in the youth category of our annual community art competition. Your piece will be featured in our upcoming exhibition, and you have been invited to attend the opening reception next Friday evening." The phone slipped from Marcus's numb fingers and landed in the fallen leaves at his feet. He won. His art, his voice, as Mrs. Chen had called it, had been heard. Someone had looked at his drawing and seen not just technical skill, but the truth he had tried to express, about loneliness, about feeling unseen in a world full of people. He called his mother immediately, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement. Selena Rivera was just finishing her shift at the hospital cafeteria, and Marcus could hear the clatter of dishes and the chatter of coworkers in the background. "Mijo!" "Slow down," she said, but her voice was warm with maternal pride. "You won? You really won?" "First place, Mama? First place in the whole competition. They want to put my drawing in a real exhibition, like in a gallery." Elena's silence stretched for so long that Marcus began to worry the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I am so proud of you, Marcus. So proud. Your father, he would be so proud too." The mention of his father, who had died in a car accident when Marcus was 8, sent a bittersweet pang through his chest. But today, even that sadness felt different somehow, less like a wound and more like a connection to love that transcended absence. "Can you come to the opening?" Marcus asked. "It's next Friday night at 7. Micho, I'll ask for the night off. This is important. This is your moment to shine." As Marcus walked the rest of the way home, his steps felt lighter than they had in months. He had done something meaningful, something that proved his worth in a way that transcended Tyler's cruelty. For the first time, he began to believe that maybe there was a future for him, beyond the hallways of Lincoln Middle School, beyond the daily struggle just to survive until 3 o'clock. He spent the evening researching the community center's upcoming exhibition online, reading about the other winners and the local artists whose work would be displayed alongside his. The more he read, the more real it became. His art was going to hang on a wall where strangers would see it, where it might touch someone the way art had always touched him. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of his small bedroom, Marcus couldn't entirely shake the anxiety that had become his constant companion. Tyler and his friends didn't know about the competition yet, but they would find out eventually. Everything at school eventually became public knowledge, and Marcus could already imagine how Tyler would react to news of his success. Would he find a way to ruin this too? Would Marcus's one moment of triumph become another source of humiliation? He forced himself to push away those thoughts. Tomorrow, he would tell Mrs. Chen about winning. He would thank her for believing in him and for giving him the courage to submit his work. And maybe, if he was brave enough, he would tell Sarah too. Maybe his success would show her that their friendship was worth the risk of Tyler's attention. As sleep finally began to claim him, Marcus allowed himself to imagine the opening reception. He pictured his drawing hanging on a clean white wall, properly lit and matted, looking professional and important. He imagined his mother standing beside him, wearing her best dress and beaming with pride. He imagined strangers stopping to look at his work, seeing in it the truth about loneliness and pain, but also about the possibility of being truly seen. What Marcus couldn't imagine, as he drifted off into the most peaceful sleep he'd had in weeks, was that his art was about to reach someone far beyond the small community center exhibition. Someone whose own struggles with pain and healing would resonate deeply with the emotions he had poured onto paper. Someone with the platform and the heart to transform his small victory into something that would echo across the country and change countless lives. The future was rushing toward Marcus Rivera faster than he could possibly know, carried on wings of unexpected compassion from a source he could never have anticipated. The news about Marcus's art competition victory spread through Lincoln Middle School with the peculiar speed that characterizes both wildfire and middle school gossip. By lunch on Friday, 3 days before the exhibition opening, everyone seemed to know that the quiet kid who got picked on had won some kind of art contest. The reactions varied dramatically depending on who was doing the reacting. Mrs. Chen had been absolutely delighted, giving Marcus a hug that smelled like paint and coffee, and promising to attend the opening reception. "This is just the beginning for you," she had said, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of a teacher who had recognized potential and seen it bloom. "This kind of recognition opens doors, Marcus. Real doors to real opportunities." Sarah had found him at his locker between classes, her face glowing with genuine excitement that temporarily overcame her recent caution about being seen with him. "Marcus, this is incredible. I knew your art was special, but winning an actual competition, this proves that other people can see what I see in your work." Even some of the teachers who barely knew him had offered congratulations in the hallways, and Marcus began to understand what it felt like to be noticed for something positive, rather than being invisible or being the target of cruelty. But Tyler Bennett's reaction was exactly what Marcus had feared it would be. "So the little artist boy thinks he's special now," Tyler announced during gym class, loud enough for everyone in the locker room to hear. "Won some kitty contest, and now he's acting like he's famous or something." Marcus was changing into his gym clothes, trying to blend into the metal lockers and hoping Tyler would move on to an easier target. But Tyler seemed particularly focused today, energized by the opportunity to tear down Marcus's moment of success. "What was the picture of, Rivera?" "Let me guess. A sad little boy crying because nobody likes him?" A few of Tyler's friends laughed, but Marcus noticed that some of the other kids were staying quiet, watching the exchange with expressions that ranged from discomfort to disapproval. The art competition win seemed to have shifted something in how his classmates saw him, creating a small buffer of respect that Tyler was working hard to destroy. "It doesn't matter what it was about," Marcus said quietly, pulling his gym shirt over his head. "It was just a local competition." "Just a local competition," Tyler repeated in a high-pitched mockery of Marcus's voice. "But you're still proud of it, aren't you? Still think it makes you better than everyone else?" Marcus turned to face Tyler directly, something he rarely did anymore. The weeks of friendship with Sarah and the confidence boost from his artistic recognition had given him a small reserve of courage he hadn't known he possessed. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the familiar anxiety building in his chest. "I'm just proud of something I worked hard on. There's nothing wrong with that." Tyler's expression darkened at the unexpected response. He was used to Marcus cowering, apologizing, disappearing into himself. This new version of Marcus, still quiet but no longer completely defeated, seemed to trigger something aggressive in the older boy. You know what? I think we should all get to see this prize-winning art, Tyler said, pulling out his phone with a malicious grin. Where's this big exhibition happening anyway? Maybe me and my friend should come check it out. Show some school spirit. The threat was clear, and Marcus felt his momentary courage evaporate. The thought of Tyler and his crew showing up at the opening reception, ruining his mother's one chance to see him honored for something positive, made his stomach turn with dread. It's not a big deal, Marcus said quickly, hating how his voice had returned to its familiar, defeated whisper. Really, it's just a small thing at the community center. Nobody you know would care about it. But Tyler's smile only grew wider. Oh, I think I care about it very much. What night is it again? Marcus remained silent, but Tyler was already typing on his phone, probably searching for information about the community center exhibition. In the age of social media and public event listings, it wouldn't take him long to find what he was looking for. The gym teacher's whistle echoed through the locker room, calling them out for class, and Tyler pocketed his phone with a look of satisfaction. See you around, Rivera. And hey, congratulations on your big win. The sarcasm in his voice made the words feel like acid on Marcus's skin. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of anxiety and regret. Marcus began to wish he had never entered the competition, never allowed himself to hope for recognition, never believed that he could have something good without Tyler finding a way to poison it. By the time he got home, he was seriously considering not attending his own opening reception. He was sitting at the small kitchen table, staring at his homework, without really seeing it, when his mother came home from her first job. Selena Rivera looked tired, as she always did by the end of her hospital cafeteria shift, but her face brightened when she saw her son. How was school today, Mijo? Are you excited about Friday night? Marcus looked up at his mother, really looked at her. He saw the pride that had been lighting up her features for the past few days whenever she mentioned the art exhibition. He saw the way she had been humming while doing dishes, the way she had called her sister to brag about her talented son, the way she had been planning what to wear to the opening, as if it were the most important social event of the year. Yeah, Mama, he said, managing a smile. I'm excited. He couldn't tell her about Tyler's threats. He couldn't destroy her happiness just because he was afraid of confrontation. Besides, he told himself, maybe Tyler wouldn't actually show up. Maybe it had just been empty bullying, designed to scare him but not follow through with action. Elena sat down across from him and reached out to squeeze his hand. You know, Marcus, when your father was alive, he used to say that you had an old soul, that you saw things other people missed and felt things more deeply than most adults. I didn't always understand what he meant, but I think I do now, seeing your art, seeing how you put your heart onto paper. Tears pricked at the corners of Marcus's eyes. His father had been gone for 4 years, but he still missed him every day, still wondered what his life might have been like with a man in the house to provide stability and protection. He would be proud, Elena continued, and he would tell you what I'm telling you now. Don't let anyone make you feel small for having a gift. Don't let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter. Her words echoed Sarah's from weeks earlier, and Marcus felt a small flame of determination rekindle in his chest. Maybe Tyler would come to the exhibition. Maybe he would try to ruin Marcus's night. But Marcus's art had won recognition from judges who didn't know him, who had seen value in his work based purely on its merit. That was real. That was something Tyler couldn't take away with cruel words or intimidation. I won't, Mama, Marcus said, squeezing her hand back. I promise. As his mother went to start dinner, Marcus pulled out his sketchbook and began working on a new drawing. This one was different from his usual pieces. Instead of focusing on loneliness or fantasy, he began sketching a scene of a young person standing on a stage, arms raised in triumph, with an audience of supportive faces looking up from below. It was aspirational rather than autobiographical, hope rather than despair. He had no way of knowing that in just one day this drawing would prove to be prophetic in ways he could never have imagined. That his story was about to intersect with forces far beyond the small world of Lincoln Middle School, and that his art and his courage were about to inspire something much larger than a local community center exhibition. The phone rang in the kitchen, interrupting his concentration, and Marcus heard his mother answer with her usual warm greeting. But something in her tone changed as she listened to the caller, and when she called out to Marcus, her voice carried an excitement that made him set down his pencil and hurry to the kitchen. Marcus, she said, holding the phone against her chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's someone from the local news station. They want to interview you about winning the art competition. They want to do a story about young artists in our community. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. A news story. Television cameras. His face and his story broadcast to the entire city. The thought was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. What should I tell them? Elena asked. Marcus thought about Tyler's threats, about the safety of staying invisible, about all the reasons why stepping into a larger spotlight might be dangerous. Then he thought about his father's belief in his old soul, about Mrs. Chen's faith in his artistic voice, about Sarah's encouragement to never let anyone convince him he didn't matter. Tell them yes, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. Tell them I'll do the interview. As his mother returned to the phone call, working out details about timing and location, Marcus realized that his story was no longer entirely his own. Something larger was beginning, something that would soon extend far beyond his small world into places he had never imagined his art could reach. The news crew arrived at the community center on Thursday evening, the day before the official opening reception. Marcus had spent the entire day at school fighting waves of nervousness, his stomach churning every time he remembered that he was going to be on television. Tyler had found out about the news story. Of course, everything eventually made its way through the school's gossip network, and had spent lunch making loud predictions about how Marcus would probably cry on camera and embarrass himself in front of the whole city. But when Marcus walked into the community center's gallery space and saw his drawing hanging on the pristine white wall, properly matted and lit with professional gallery lighting, all of his anxiety temporarily evaporated. His art looked important here, meaningful in a way that transcended the circumstances of its creation. Invisible hung at eye level, commanding attention, impossible to overlook or dismiss. The drawing depicted a student sitting alone at a cafeteria table, surrounded by the negative space that represented his isolation, while other students formed tight, laughing groups around him. But what made the piece powerful was the way Marcus had drawn the lone figure, not defeated or broken, but thoughtful, dignified, quietly strong despite his solitude. It was a portrait of resilience in the face of rejection, hope persisting despite circumstances. Marcus Rivera? A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a professional smile approached him, followed by a camera operator and a sound technician. I'm Jennifer Walsh, from Channel 7 News. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us today. Elena, who had taken time off from both her jobs to accompany her son, squeezed Marcus's shoulder encouragingly. She looked proud and nervous in equal measure, wearing her best dress and the silver earrings that had been a gift from Marcus's father years earlier. The interview began with basic questions about Marcus's artistic interests and his inspiration for the winning piece. As he talked about his love for drawing and his hope to become a professional artist someday, Marcus found himself relaxing into the conversation. Jennifer Walsh was skilled at putting her subjects at ease, and her questions were thoughtful rather than invasive. Tell me about this particular piece, she said, gesturing toward Invisible. What inspired you to create this image? Marcus looked at his drawing, seeing it through the eyes of the television audience who would soon be watching this interview. I think a lot of kids know what it feels like to be alone in a crowded room, he said carefully. Sometimes you can be surrounded by people and still feel like nobody really sees you. I wanted to draw that feeling, but also to show that even when you're alone, you still have dignity. You still matter. Have you experienced that feeling yourself? It was the question Marcus had been dreading, the one that would require him to choose between honesty and safety. He glanced at his mother, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. Yeah, he said quietly. I know what it feels like to be invisible. I know what it feels like when people look right through you, or when they see you but wish they didn't. Jennifer's expression softened with genuine sympathy. That must be very difficult for someone your age. Do you find that art helps you process those feelings? Art is how I make sense of everything, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger as he talked about something he understood completely. When I draw, I can take all the confusing or painful stuff in my life and turn it into something beautiful, or at least something that means something. It's like taking all the feelings that hurt and giving them a place to live outside of my head. The camera operator moved to get close-up shots of Marcus's artwork, while Jennifer asked a few more questions about his plans for the future and his advice for other young artists. As they wrapped up the interview, Marcus felt proud of how he had handled himself. He had been honest without being bitter, vulnerable without being pathetic. This will air on our evening newscast tomorrow, Jennifer told him as the crew packed up their equipment. It should be a beautiful piece. Your artwork is really remarkable, Marcus, and your ability to articulate what it means is impressive for someone your age. After the news crew left, Marcus and his mother walked around the gallery, examining the other winning entries and talking quietly about the magnitude of what was happening. Other families began arriving for a preview of the exhibition, and Marcus found himself being congratulated by strangers who had heard about the news interview. "I'm so proud of you, Mijo," Elena said as they drove home that evening. "Not just for the art, but for how you spoke about it. You sounded like a young man who knows his own worth." Marcus smiled, feeling more hopeful about the future than he had in months. Tomorrow would bring the official opening reception, his television debut, and probably Tyler's promised appearance, but tonight he felt strong enough to handle whatever came next. The news story aired at 6 o'clock on Friday evening, just an hour before the opening reception was scheduled to begin. Marcus and his mother watched it together on their small television, Elena recording it on her phone so she could show her coworkers and send it to family members. The segment was beautifully edited, focusing on Marcus's artwork and his thoughtful commentary about the power of art to transform pain into meaning. Jennifer Walsh had crafted a story that was both inspiring and honest, highlighting the universal experience of feeling invisible while celebrating the way creativity could serve as both outlet and voice. And tonight, Jennifer concluded the segment. Marcus Rivera will be honored at the opening reception of the Community Center's annual art exhibition, where his work will be displayed alongside pieces by artists of all ages. For a young man who knows what it feels like to be invisible, he's certainly making himself seen through his remarkable talent. As the story ended and transitioned to the weather report, Marcus felt a complex mixture of pride and anxiety. His story was now public in a way that felt both empowering and terrifying. Thousands of people across the city had just heard about his experience with feeling invisible, and while most would probably forget about it by tomorrow, some would remember. Some might even be inspired. An hour later, Marcus and his mother arrived at the community center for the opening reception. The gallery was already bustling with activity. Families of the other winners, local art enthusiasts, community leaders, and curious residents who had seen the news story and decided to attend. Marcus was surprised by the number of people, and even more surprised by how many of them approached him to offer congratulations and praise for his artwork. Mrs. Chen arrived early, beaming with teacher pride and introducing Marcus to several local artists who had come specifically to meet him after seeing the news interview. Sarah appeared with her parents, who thanked Marcus for being such a good friend to their daughter and expressed their admiration for his courage in creating such honest art. For the first 30 minutes of the reception, Marcus felt like he was living in a dream. He stood next to his artwork, watching strangers study it with serious expressions, listening to conversations about technique and emotional impact, accepting compliments from people who understood art in ways that his middle school classmates never could. Then Tyler Bennett walked through the front door of the community center, flanked by 3 of his friends and wearing a smirk that made Marcus's blood run cold. The boys moved through the gallery space like predators, loud and disruptive, in a setting that called for quiet appreciation. Other guests began to notice them, particularly when Tyler raised his voice to comment on one of the paintings, calling it weird and laughing at the abstract shapes that the artist had used to express emotion. Marcus watched them approach his section of the gallery with growing dread. His mother was across the room, talking with Mrs. Chen and some of the other parents, unaware that her son's tormentors had arrived to spoil his moment of triumph. "Well, well, well," Tyler said when he reached Marcus's display. "There's the famous artist himself. Saw you on TV tonight, Rivera. You looked even more pathetic than usual." "Please don't do this here," Marcus said quietly, glancing around at the other guests who were beginning to notice the commotion. "This is important to me." "Oh, this is important to you," Tyler's voice dripped with mock concern. "That's so sweet. Hey, guys, come look at the award-winning picture. It's called Invisible, which is perfect because that's exactly what Rivera wishes he could be right now." Tyler's friends gathered around the artwork, making exaggerated studying gestures and offering loud, sarcastic commentary. Other gallery visitors began to stare, some with disapproval directed at the disruptive teenagers, others with sympathy for Marcus, who was clearly the target of their cruelty. "You know what I think?" Tyler continued, his voice carrying across the gallery space. "I think this whole thing is just sad. Drawing pictures about how lonely you are instead of doing something to change it. Maybe if you weren't such a weirdo, you wouldn't have to feel invisible." The words hit Marcus like physical blows, made worse by the public setting and the presence of people who had just been celebrating his achievement. He felt tears threatening and hated himself for it, hated that Tyler could still reduce him to this, even on what should have been the best night of his young life. But before Marcus could respond, before he could flee or fight back or crumble under the weight of humiliation, something unexpected happened. A woman's voice, clear and strong and unmistakably famous, cut through the gallery chatter from somewhere near the entrance. "Excuse me, could you tell me where I might find Marcus Rivera? I saw his interview on the news tonight, and I had to come see his artwork for myself." Every head in the gallery turned toward the voice, and Marcus felt his world tilt completely off its axis. Standing at the reception desk, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking exactly like herself but somehow more real and present than seemed possible, was Selena Gomez. The gallery fell into complete silence. Tyler's mouth dropped open mid-sentence. Marcus felt his knees go weak as he tried to process what he was seeing. Selena Gomez was here, at his art exhibition. Looking for him, the receptionist, clearly starstruck but trying to maintain professional composure, pointed in Marcus's direction. Selena smiled and began walking toward him, and Marcus realized that his life was about to change in ways that he could never have imagined, not in his wildest dreams or most hopeful fantasies. Selena Gomez moved through the gallery with the kind of graceful confidence that comes from years of public appearances, but there was something different about her demeanor tonight. She wasn't here as a celebrity making a scheduled appearance. She was here as someone who had been genuinely moved by Marcus's story and had made a spontaneous decision to act on that feeling. As she approached, Marcus became acutely aware of everything around him, the way conversations had stopped mid-sentence throughout the gallery, the sound of phones being pulled out to capture the moment, the way Tyler and his friends had gone completely silent, their expressions shifting from smug mockery to stunned disbelief. "Marcus?" Selena said when she reached him, her voice warm and familiar from countless interviews and songs, but somehow more intimate in person. "I'm Selena. I saw your interview tonight, and I had to come meet you. Your artwork is absolutely beautiful." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but found that no words would come. He was 12 years old, standing in front of one of the most famous people in the world, who had just told him his art was beautiful. The surreal nature of the moment made it difficult to believe it was actually happening. Thank you," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe you're here." Selena smiled, and Marcus noticed that it wasn't the polished, camera-ready smile he had seen in magazines and on television. This was softer, more genuine, tinged with something that looked like understanding. "When I heard your interview, when you talked about feeling invisible and using art to transform pain into something meaningful, it really resonated with me," she said, turning to study his drawing more closely. "I know what it feels like to feel alone in a crowded room, to feel like people see you but don't really see you. Your artwork captures that feeling perfectly." Selena Rivera had noticed the commotion and was making her way across the gallery, her expression shifting from confusion to shock as she realized who was speaking with her son. Mrs. Chen followed close behind, her teacher instincts kicking in as she recognized that something significant was happening. "The way you've drawn the figure," Selena continued, pointing to specific details in Marcus's artwork. "He's isolated, but he's not defeated. There's dignity in his posture, strength in the way he holds himself. That takes real insight, especially for someone your age." Marcus found his voice returning as they talked about his art, the subject that had always been his most comfortable ground. "I wanted to show that being alone doesn't mean you're weak," he said, gaining confidence. "Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who survive being invisible." "Exactly," Selena said, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "That's exactly what I see in this piece. You've turned something painful into something powerful." It was then that Tyler Bennett, apparently unable to resist the opportunity to insert himself into the conversation with a celebrity, stepped forward with his characteristic arrogance intact, despite the obvious shift in power dynamics. "Hey, aren't you Selena Gomez?" he said, his voice carrying the same confident tone he used to intimidate Marcus. "I'm Tyler. I go to school with Marcus here." Selena turned to look at Tyler, and Marcus watched her expression change subtly as she took in the boy's aggressive posture and the way Marcus had immediately tensed at his approach. Her years in the entertainment industry had given her a keen ability to read people and situations, and it was clear that she quickly understood exactly what kind of relationship Tyler had with Marcus. "Nice to meet you, Tyler," she said politely but coolly. "Are you here to support Marcus's achievement?" The question was seemingly innocent, but it carried an undertone that made Tyler shift uncomfortably. "Yeah, sure," he said, his bravado faltering slightly under her steady gaze. "We're all really proud of him." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for Selena's intuitive understanding of the situation. Without him having to explain anything, she had somehow grasped the true nature of his relationship with Tyler and had subtly positioned herself as his protector. "That's wonderful," Selena said, her voice remaining pleasant while her eyes stayed sharp. "It's so important for young artists to have supportive peers. Bullying and negativity can really damage someone's creative spirit, don't you think?" The word bullying hung in the air like a challenge. Tyler's friend shuffled uncomfortably behind him, clearly understanding that they were being called out by someone whose opinion actually mattered in the wider world. "Yeah, totally," Tyler mumbled, his usual confidence completely deflated. "Bullying is bad." Elena had reached them by now, and Selena turned to greet Marcus's mother with the same warmth she had shown her son. "Mrs. Rivera? I'm Selena Gomez. Your son is incredibly talented, and his story really touched my heart. You should be very proud." "I am," Elena said, still looking slightly stunned by the encounter. "Every day I am proud of who he is becoming." Selena spent the next 20 minutes talking with Marcus about his art, his dreams for the future, and his experience as a young person navigating difficult social situations. She was genuinely interested in his responses, asking follow-up questions and sharing some of her own experiences with feeling misunderstood during her early career. "You know," she said at one point, "I started performing when I was very young, and there were times when I felt like people saw the character I played or the image they wanted me to be, but they didn't see me. Art, whether it's music or visual art like yours, can be a way of showing people who you really are inside." As they talked, Marcus became aware that a crowd had gathered around them, gallery visitors pulling out phones to record the interaction, local news crews arriving after getting word that Selena Gomez was making an impromptu appearance. But instead of feeling overwhelmed by the attention, Marcus felt protected by Selena's presence and empowered by her genuine interest in his work. Tyler and his friends had retreated to the edges of the crowd, clearly uncomfortable with the way the evening had turned against them. The boy who had seemed so powerful in the hallways of Lincoln Middle School looked small and insignificant in the presence of real celebrity and genuine kindness. "Marcus," Selena said as their conversation began to wind down, "I want to ask you something. Would you be interested in sharing your story on a larger platform? I have a pretty big social media following, and I think your message about resilience and the power of art could inspire a lot of other young people who are going through similar struggles." Marcus looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Selena. "You mean like post about my art online? I mean, share your story, your artwork, your message that being different is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. I think you could help a lot of kids who feel invisible feel seen." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Marcus had gone from being unknown to being featured on local news, to being offered a platform with millions of potential viewers, all in the span of a few days. But looking at Selena's sincere expression, thinking about all the kids who might be sitting alone in cafeterias across the country, he knew there was only one answer he could give. "Yes," he said, his voice stronger than it had been all evening. "I'd like that very much." As the evening progressed and more media attention focused on the unlikely meeting between the pop superstar and the young artist, Marcus began to understand that his story was expanding beyond anything he had ever imagined. What had started as a small act of creative courage, entering a local art competition, was becoming something that could potentially reach young people around the world. Tyler and his friends left the gallery early, slinking out without saying goodbye. Their plans to humiliate Marcus thoroughly backfired. But Marcus barely noticed their departure. He was too busy talking with Selena about art, about resilience, about the responsibility that comes with having a platform to speak for those who feel voiceless. When the formal reception ended and the gallery began to empty, Selena asked if she could take a photo with Marcus in front of his winning artwork. The image would soon be seen by millions of people across social media platforms, but in the moment it felt intimate and personal. Two artists who had found understanding in each other's experiences with visibility and invisibility, strength and vulnerability. "Remember," Selena told him as they prepared to say goodbye, "you have a gift, and gifts are meant to be shared. Don't let anyone ever convince you to make yourself smaller just to make other people more comfortable." As Marcus watched Selena leave the community center, surrounded by her security team and the small crowd of fans who had gathered outside, he felt like he was standing at the threshold of a completely different life. Tomorrow he would still have to go to Lincoln Middle School, still have to navigate the complex social dynamics of middle school life. But everything had changed. He had been seen, truly seen, by someone whose opinion carried weight in the world. More importantly, he had been given a platform to help other invisible kids feel less alone. The boy who had walked into the gallery that evening feeling vulnerable and afraid was walking out feeling empowered and purposeful. His art had become more than personal expression. It had become a bridge, connecting his experience to the experiences of countless other young people who needed to know that their pain could be transformed into something meaningful. Marcus woke up on Saturday morning to discover that his life had become unrecognizable overnight. His mother was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, scrolling through what appeared to be thousands of social media posts and news articles, her expression shifting between amazement and concern. "Mijo," she said when she saw him emerge from his bedroom, still in his pajamas and rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You need to see this." Selena had posted the photo of herself and Marcus standing in front of his artwork on her Instagram account, which had over 400 million followers. But it wasn't just the photo. She had written a lengthy caption telling Marcus's story, praising his artistic talent, and speaking powerfully about the importance of supporting young people who feel marginalized or invisible. "I met an incredible young artist last night," the post began. Marcus Rivera won first place in a local art competition with a piece called Invisible that captures the experience of feeling alone in a crowded room, something I think many of us can relate to. His interview moved me to tears, not just because of his talent, but because of his wisdom and resilience in the face of difficulty. This is what courage looks like, turning your pain into something beautiful that can help others feel less alone. The post had already been liked by over 2 million people and shared by thousands of other celebrities, artists, and influencers. The comments section was filled with messages of support for Marcus, stories from other young people who had experienced bullying, and praise for Selena's decision to use her platform to highlight the issue. But it was the broader media coverage that truly demonstrated how far Marcus's story had traveled. Major news outlets across the country had picked up the story of the pop superstar's surprise visit to support a bullied middle school artist. "Selena Gomez champions young bullying victim through art," read one headline. "When fame meets purpose, Selena Gomez's powerful message about invisible kids," read another. Elena showed Marcus article after article, each one telling his story to a different audience, each one expanding the reach of his message. The local news station that had first interviewed him was now fielding calls from national networks wanting to do follow-up stories. The community center had been contacted by art galleries in major cities expressing interest in displaying Marcus's work. "Are you okay with all this, Mijo?" Elena asked, watching her son's face carefully as he processed the magnitude of what was happening. "It's wonderful, but it's also very big, very fast." Marcus sat down beside his mother and continued scrolling through the responses to Selena's post. Among the celebrity comments and media coverage, he found what mattered most to him: messages from other young people who said his story had helped them feel less alone. "I'm in 7th grade and I get picked on every day for being different," one comment read. "Seeing your art and hearing your story makes me feel like maybe I'm not the only one who feels invisible sometimes. Thank you for being brave enough to share this. I started drawing again after seeing your interview," wrote another. "I had stopped because some kids at my school said art was stupid, but you reminded me that art is how I make sense of the world. Thank you." "This is what I want," Marcus told his mother, pointing to these comments. "If my story can help other kids feel less alone, then all of this craziness is worth it." The phone rang almost constantly throughout the day. Reporters wanting interviews, art collectors interested in purchasing Marcus's work, other celebrities, representatives reaching out to offer support. Elena fielded most of the calls, protecting her son from the overwhelming attention while trying to sort through legitimate opportunities. But the call that mattered most came from Sarah. "Marcus, oh my God, you're everywhere," she said when he finally answered his phone. "My mom saw you on the national news this morning. They're calling you an inspiration to young artists across the country." "It's pretty crazy," Marcus admitted. "I still can't believe any of this is real." "How are you feeling about going back to school on Monday?" Sarah asked, and Marcus could hear the concern in her voice. "Tyler and his friends, they're probably not going to handle this very well." It was the question Marcus had been avoiding thinking about all day. His story was now known by millions of people, including his entire school community. The protection that invisibility had provided was gone forever, replaced by a spotlight that felt both empowering and terrifying. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I think it's going to be different now. When Selena was at the gallery last night, Tyler tried to act like he supported me, tried to get her attention. But she saw right through him. I think a lot of people are going to see through him now." That evening, as Marcus sat in his room working on a new drawing inspired by the events of the past few days, he received a text message that made him smile. It was from Selena, sent from her personal number. "Hi Marcus, I hope you're handling all the attention okay. I wanted you to know that I've been getting messages from young people all over the world saying your story inspired them. You're making a real difference. Also, I'd love to talk to you about some opportunities to continue sharing your message. When you're ready, no pressure. Just know that you have support whenever you need it. Keep creating." 2 hearts. Marcus read the message 3 times before it fully sank in. Selena Gomez, the Selena Gomez, was personally checking on him and offering ongoing support. The girl who had soundtracked his childhood, whose music had provided comfort during his loneliest moments, was now in his corner, believing in his potential to make a difference in the world. He spent the rest of the evening working on his new drawing, a piece he was already thinking of calling Scene. It depicted a young person standing on a stage, arms outstretched, with beams of light illuminating them from above, while an audience of diverse faces looked up with expressions of recognition and understanding. It was his visual representation of what the past few days had felt like, the transformation from invisible to visible, from isolated to connected. As he worked, Marcus thought about Tyler and his friends, about how different Monday morning would be from every other Monday he had experienced at Lincoln Middle School. Part of him was nervous about the confrontation that was surely coming, but a larger part of him felt ready for it. He wasn't the same boy who had cowered in hallways and eaten lunch alone in the library. He was someone whose story mattered, whose voice had reached millions of people, whose art had been praised by one of the most famous people in the world. More importantly, he was someone who had discovered his purpose. His art was no longer just personal expression or emotional outlet. It was a tool for connection, a way to help other invisible kids feel seen. That sense of purpose gave him a strength he had never known he possessed. The drawing of Scene was nearly complete when Elena knocked on his door to say goodnight. She looked at his new artwork with the same pride she had shown at the gallery, but there was something else in her expression too, a recognition that her son was growing into someone who could handle the responsibility that came with his newfound platform. "Tomorrow's going to be different," she said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "I know," Marcus replied, "but I think I'm ready for different." As he fell asleep that night, Marcus thought about all the kids who might be lying in their own beds, feeling invisible and alone, not knowing that somewhere in the world, people were working to make sure they felt seen. He thought about the power of art to bridge distances and connect hearts, about the responsibility that came with having a voice that others could hear. Monday morning would bring new challenges, but it would also bring new opportunities to live up to the faith that Selena and millions of others had placed in him. For the first time in his young life, Marcus Rivera fell asleep feeling not invisible, but magnificently, purposefully visible. Monday morning at Lincoln Middle School felt like walking into a completely different universe. Marcus arrived to find clusters of students gathered around phones, showing each other the viral social media posts and news coverage from the weekend. Conversation stopped as he walked past, but instead of the cruel snickers and whispered insults he was accustomed to, he heard murmurs of recognition, excitement, and something that sounded remarkably like respect. "That's him," he heard a 7th grader whisper to her friend. "That's the kid Selena Gomez visited. I saw his art online," another student said. "It's actually really good." The hallway felt different as Marcus walked toward his locker. Students who had previously looked through him as if he didn't exist now met his eyes, some offering shy smiles or small nods of acknowledgement. A few even approached him directly, congratulating him on his success and expressing genuine admiration for his artwork. But it was Sarah's greeting that meant the most. She was waiting by his locker with a huge smile and a piece of paper in her hand. "Marcus, I printed out some of the comments from Selena's post," she said, handing him the paper. "I thought you might want to see them during lunch or when things get overwhelming. They're all from kids our age who said your story helped them." Marcus scanned the printed comments, feeling his heart swell with each message from young people who had found hope in his experience. This was what mattered. Not the celebrity attention or media coverage, but the real connections being made with other kids who understood what it felt like to be invisible. "Thank you," he said to Sarah. "Having you as a friend through all of this, it means everything." Sarah beamed. "Are you kidding? I'm friends with a famous artist now. I'm definitely the coolest person in 7th grade." They were laughing together when Tyler Bennett appeared at the end of the hallway. But something was fundamentally different about the encounter. Instead of approaching with his usual swagger and aggressive confidence, Tyler seemed uncertain, almost tentative. The power dynamic that had defined their relationship for months had shifted completely. Several other students noticed Tyler's approach and stopped to watch, clearly curious about how this confrontation would play out in light of everything that had happened over the weekend. Marcus felt their attention, but unlike previous public encounters with Tyler, this attention felt supportive rather than threatening. "Hey, Marcus," Tyler said when he reached them, his voice lacking its usual mocking edge. "I saw all the stuff online about Selena Gomez and everything. That's pretty cool." The words sounded forced, scripted, as if Tyler had rehearsed them but wasn't entirely sure how to deliver them convincingly. Marcus studied his former tormentor's face, seeing something he had never seen there before: uncertainty about his own social position. "Thanks," Marcus replied simply, not feeling the need to elaborate or make the conversation easier for Tyler. "Look," Tyler continued, glancing around at the students who were watching the interaction. "About some of the stuff that happened. Maybe I was just joking around too much, you know? Maybe I didn't realize." He trailed off, clearly struggling to find words that would allow him to retreat from his previous behavior without actually admitting wrongdoing or apologizing meaningfully. Marcus recognized the attempt at face-saving for what it was, but he also understood that this was probably the closest thing to an acknowledgement of his cruelty that Tyler would ever offer. "Maybe," Marcus said calmly, "we should just focus on moving forward." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something better. It was Marcus claiming the power to set the terms of their future interactions. Tyler nodded quickly, seeming relieved to have an exit from the uncomfortable conversation. "Yeah, moving forward," Tyler agreed. That's good." As Tyler walked away, clearly diminished by the encounter, Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm excitedly. "Did you see that? He was actually nervous talking to you. The whole power thing is completely flipped." Marcus watched Tyler disappear into the crowd of students, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction in seeing his tormentor humbled, but also something that might have been pity. Tyler's entire social identity had been built on the ability to diminish others, and when that foundation was removed, he seemed lost, uncertain of who he was supposed to be. The rest of the school day continued in the same surreal vein. Teachers who had barely acknowledged Marcus's existence now made special efforts to encourage his artistic pursuits. The principal, Mr. Davidson, called him to the office, not for punishment, but to congratulate him and discuss the possibility of featuring his work in the school's main hallway display case. "We are very proud of you, Marcus," Mr. Davidson said, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone who had recognized an opportunity to associate the school with positive publicity. "Your achievement reflects well on our entire community, and we want to support your continued success in any way we can." Marcus accepted the praise graciously, but he couldn't help thinking about how different this conversation might have been if his art hadn't received national attention. Would Mr. Davidson have cared about his achievement if Selena Gomez hadn't posted about it? Would the school have supported him if his story hadn't gone viral? It was Mrs. Chen who provided the most meaningful response to his newfound fame. She found him after art class, when the other students had left and the room was quiet except for the gentle hum of the pottery wheels cooling down. "I want you to know," she said, "that I'm proud of you for exactly the same reasons I was proud of you before any of this happened. Your talent, your perseverance, your willingness to be vulnerable in your art. Those things matter whether one person sees them or 1 million people see them." "Thank you," Marcus said, feeling a deep gratitude for his teacher's consistency and genuine care. "I keep worrying that I'm going to disappoint everyone, that all this attention is too much for me to live up to." Mrs. Chen smiled with the kind of wisdom that comes from years of nurturing young artists through the challenges of creative growth. "Marcus, the most important thing you can do is keep creating honestly. Don't try to make art that lives up to other people's expectations. Make art that comes from your heart, just like you always have. That's what made people notice you in the first place." During lunch, instead of hiding in the library or the art room, Marcus sat in the cafeteria with Sarah and several other students who had approached them throughout the day. For the first time since starting at Lincoln Middle School, he ate his lunch surrounded by peers who seemed genuinely interested in knowing him as a person rather than seeing him as a target. The conversation ranged from questions about meeting Selena Gomez to discussions about different art techniques, from shared experiences with feeling like outsiders to plans for future creative projects. Marcus found himself laughing more than he had in months, feeling the loosening of social anxiety that had been his constant companion for so long. As the final bell rang and students began filing out of the building, Marcus realized that he had survived his first day as a newly visible person. More than survived, he had thrived. The attention had been overwhelming at times, but it had also been largely positive, and more importantly, it had opened doors to connections with other students that he never could have imagined. Walking home, Marcus thought about the drawing he was working on, Seen, and how it had taken on new layers of meaning over the past few days. Being truly seen, he was learning, wasn't just about receiving attention or recognition. It was about being understood, valued for who you actually were, rather than dismissed for who others assumed you to be. His phone buzzed with a text message from Selena. "Hope your first day back at school went well. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'd love to set up a video call this week to talk about some opportunities to expand your message. You're inspiring so many people, Marcus. Keep being brave." Marcus smiled as he read the message, still hardly believing that this was his life now. But more than the celebrity connection or the national attention, what filled him with the deepest satisfaction were the moments throughout the day when other students had shared their own stories of feeling invisible, when they had thanked him for making them feel less alone. That evening, as he put the finishing touches on Seen, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his world had changed in just a few weeks. From invisible to visible, from isolated to connected, from victim to advocate. The transformation hadn't erased his challenges or solved all his problems, but it had given him something invaluable, the knowledge that his voice mattered, that his experiences could help others, and that art really could change lives. The boy who had once felt invisible had learned the most important lesson of all. Everyone deserves to be seen, and sometimes it just takes one person believing in your worth to help you see it yourself. His story was no longer just about surviving middle school or overcoming bullying. It was about the power of compassion to transform pain into purpose, and the responsibility that comes with being given a platform to speak for those who have not yet found their voices. Marcus Rivera had indeed become magnificently, purposefully visible, and he was just getting started. What moment in this story resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this narrative, please subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these stories coming.